Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make an easy ring, and this is kind of a fun ring. I call it the Dangle ring because it looks like this, just a simple ring band around with some thick gauge wire there, and then I've just attached a load of dangles to it of whatever beads that you want. In this case I just used some rondelles, some small blue ones, and then some larger silver grey ones. They have nice sparkle to them, and you just use head pins for this. So it's just a really fun ring. It's got a nice movement to it, so when it sits on your finger it will sit like this and kind of dangle. So it's a nice and fun ring, and you can obviously do whatever combination you want to do with your beads and how you want to set them up on the ring as well. So that's completely up to you. But if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. And so to make this ring, what we'll need our wire here, and in this case I'm working with two different gauges. We've got a thicker wire here, and this is a 1.25mm. You can also use a 1.5 or something like that, just something that's quite substantial, because we're only going around the ring once, so the ring band, and this is going to work perfectly for that. And this is just regular round wire, and then also what I have here is a 0.4mm in the gauge, but this is just to wrap around this, just to kind of connect it together. So we don't need much of this at all, and this is regular round wire as well. And then what we'll need as well is some head pins, because that's what's going to create the dangles. And you can really choose what you want. You can choose flat head pins, ball head pins, it's really up to you. You just got to make sure obviously that the head pins will go through the beads that you're using. So just in some cases, if you're using smaller beads, you can have a smaller hole, so you just got to be aware of that. That's where you can also use something like these. These are featherweight head pins, so they're really small in the gauge. So they're very skinny compared to regular head pins. So just make sure that your head pins can go through your beads. And then for the beads, you can really use anything that you want. In this case, I've just got some 4mm hematite here that are blue coated, and then I've just got some 2mm silver spacer beads. But again, you can just use whatever you want really. I just prefer to kind of keep it to the smaller size beads, but that's completely up to you. So let's get all the materials together and then let's get started. So what we need to do first is we need to create our ring base, so we can add our dangle to that. And then what we'll need is we need to get a 1.25mm wire out first. And then what you need to do is cut a short length, and this really doesn't have to be very long. You can maybe say about 15 to 20 centimeters. It's really just enough to wrap around your finger, and a bit extra for the loops, and then just enough for you to work with really. So that's all you need. And then you just want to make sure that it's nice and straightened out. It's fine if it's got a curve to it like this, but just make sure there's no kinks or bends in it. And then we can just run our fingers over it, warm up the wire a little bit to get it ready to work with. And then what we need to do is we need to get a ring mandrel out to create the shape of the ring band. If you don't have a ring mandrel, you can use something else like a marker pen that's rounded shape, as long as you make sure that it's the right size for your finger. So you want to get your ring mandrel here and take your wire and choose what size you want it to be, and then just place about the middle of your wire here around the back of your ring mandrel, and then just press the sides here over to the front so the two ends are crossing over each other like that, and just keep shaping it until your wires are coming out on opposite sides like this, so you have a bit of an overlap right there. And then you just want to make sure that you have the size that you want them to be, because once you've set it to the size and you wrapped it, you can't really alter that. So make sure you have the size you want it to be, and your wires are crossing over like this. And then we need to create the loops. So to create the loops, I'm just going to take it off my ring mandrel. You can always refer back to it to make sure you keep the right size and shape as we're making the loops before we tie it together. So what I'm going to do is we need to cut these ends down a little bit. As you can see, we don't need much wire for this, so even this piece is a bit too long. It's nice to make sure you have enough to work with though. So I want to cut it down, and you don't need to cut it down to the exact size straight away, because that can be quite hard to tell with how large your loops are going to be. So just cut it down so you have a few centimeters there, because then you start making your loops and you can always gradually cut off more and more, and then you have a little bit easier space to work with now as well. So we'll need to make our loops, and for this what I like to use is these. So I like to use these 6-step bell making pliers, and I just like to then choose what size I want for my loops, because we're making two loops and I want to make sure that they're about the same size. So if you use something like this, you make sure that the loops that you make are exactly the same size every time you use it. You can easily use your iron nose pliers as well, that's completely up to you. But obviously you just want to make sure to try and use the same place on your pliers then. But what I'm going to do is, if you don't have these and you would like them, I'm just going to put a link in the description box to where you can buy them. But otherwise, I'm going to use these now to make the loops. So I'm going to grab my pliers here and then decide which one I want to use, either the smallest one or the second smallest one. I think I'm going to use the second smallest one because I don't want my loop to be too large so it sticks out too much, but also I still need enough space in the loop to get all my head pins in there when we make them. So I'm going to make sure I use that one, start with one side at a time, put it towards the end of your wire there, and then start rolling it back, and just kind of use your finger as leverage to put your pliers against. And that way also, I always have like a finger in the ring band there to help keep the shape really. And then just keep rolling it back until the end of your wire meets up with itself. And as you can see there, I've rolled it all the way down, but this sticks out too far. So this is where we can go in and adjust the size of it and then keep cutting it down. So I'll get my cutters again here, go in and cut off a bit at the end in the loop, so now it's more open, and go back in with my pliers and then roll it a bit further. And you can keep doing this until you're happy with how it sits and until it sits in the right spot. And then you can also decide that maybe this loop is a bit too large actually. I'm actually thinking that now that the loop is a bit large. So I'm going to go down, because you can easily go down in size. I'm actually going to go down and use the smaller one instead. And then just start rolling that. So the loop here becomes a little bit tighter, a bit smaller. And that actually works a lot better, I can see. But still it's a little bit too far out. So just keep doing this. Cut off a little bit at a time. Just a few millimeters at a time, unless you know it's way far out, and then just keep doing this. And you can always just, even if you don't think it's quite right, you can always just go to the other side and then start making that loop, and then we can just readjust it right at the end. I'm just now, because I know I don't need this long length, I'm just going to cut it down a bit more right from the beginning, and then go back to my pliers. Use the same place on my pliers here, and then again use my kind of fingers as leverage and then roll it back. And there, as you can see, they aren't really anywhere near each other yet. So what we need to do is these two loops need to come in further towards the middle and sit right next to each other. So that's what we need to do. So we need to keep rolling these until they sit right where we want them to. And this is just doing it a bit as you go. Kind of move from side to side. Until you're completely happy with them. We're getting there now, more. Just a little bit more. Almost there. And roll it back a bit more. And then you can look at it and see if you're happy with it. And if you feel like they sit nice and perfectly close to each other now, it doesn't matter if they actually end up overlapping a little bit. If they sit like that, that's absolutely fine. Because what we'll be doing is obviously filling this space up with all our dangles, but we're going to connect these two sides as well now. So what you can just do is get your chain nose pliers as well, and just make sure that they're nice and flat, so you don't have the end of the wire kind of coming towards one side of it. So just do that. But then when you're happy with it like this and make sure the size is still correct, then now what we need to do is get a 0.4mm wire and then wrap them together. So to do that, we want to cut off a length of a 0.4mm wire here, and this again does not need to be very long. maybe about 20 centimeters or so, if that as well. What you can quite often do is if you have some leftover wire from something else that you've cut off, you can just use that. Because I always do that, I always save all my leftover wire, so all my scrap wire. And this is really just a piece of scrap wire that I had left over from something else. So you can quite often just use that. And then what we need to do is start wrapping here. So I just start towards just the one side here, and just start wrapping it just a couple of times around, just to secure it onto the base first. Just a few times like this. And then what you can do is, what I like to do is make sure that the coils there that are wrapped are nice and tight together. So you can just get your pliers, you can use your fingers or nails. If you don't have any nails, you can use your pliers like this and squeeze them together. And then just have a bit of a tail here to hold on to while we're wrapping the rest. And then what we need to do is push this up to right before the first loop, right there. And then I'm going to take the end and then stick that through the loop, because that's how we wrap the two sides together, and to make it nice and secure and stay in place. So it's kind of like you just continue in the same wrap, but now you're going in the loop and around both wires instead, just for a couple of times here. And back around the loop again and through it. And continuing your wraps to lie right next to each other. So a couple of times here, back through the ring band, and then you can go a couple of times in the center here, in between your two loops. Once you've just done it a couple of times in the loop, always making sure that your wire is right next to each other. We're just moving our way across until we reach the other loop, and then I'm going to start wrapping through that one. And this is literally just to secure it in place. So as you can see, we're moving our way across, and we really don't need much wire for this. A couple of times through this loop as well. Like that. And then once you've done that, I want to finish off on this side by doing just a couple of times around this single wire again. And just to be able to finish off this weaving wire. So just like we did on the other side where we started out. Just a couple of times like this, and that's fine. So now this is nice and secure, it's not going to move anywhere at all. Your loops are going to stay in place, and the whole ring is going to stay the size that you wanted it to be. So now that I'm done wrapping and it's nice and tight together here, it's not going to go anywhere, what we need to do now is just get rid of these excess ends. So I'm going to take my flush cutters here, my wire cutters, and then just make sure that it's wrapped nicely and sits correctly, and then towards the top of my ring, or the ring band, where my wire is, that's where you want to cut it. So I'm going to cut it right close to the ring band, and then I'm going to take my chain nose pliers here and then go in right where it is and squeeze down the end, and I like to kind of roll it in the same direction as your coils go. So if the wire continued to wrap around, that's how you would do the next wrap. And then it's going to be nice and secure, you're not going to be able to feel it, because you want to make sure that you cut them towards the top of the ring, because you might think that you want to finish your ends on the inside of the ring here, but the problem with that is, because it's a ring, that part is going to be scratching against your skin. So to avoid that, we need to finish off our wires towards the top of the ring, the same on the other side, and then just tuck that completely into place so no ends of the wire are sticking out and scratching or anything. And then there we have the finished ring band, and this is going to be the base for the ring. And so now what we need to do is we need to create our dangles to go onto the ring. And this is where we want to get our head pins in. So we just take one at a time, and we're going to make one dangle at a time and then attach it to the ring. So you get your head pins and then whatever beads that you want to use. Now here's just, I have the 2mm metal spacer beads in silver, and then I have my 4mm hematite beads here in blue. And those are just the ones that I'm going to be using for this, but like I said, you can do any combination of beads that you want. And this is just to kind of mix it up a bit so it's not all the same as well. I'm using 2 different sizes and colours there. So what we just need to do is start loading up our beads and a head pin, And this is really, you can make this however you want it to be. This is completely up to personal preference. I'm going to start with one of my hematite and then a spacer bead, a hematite and a spacer bead. And I just kind of like to alternate the beads here to give it a bit of a, just a bit of a mixed look like this, and a nice finish to it. And then this, also how long you want your dangles to be is really up to you. You can either keep them really short, so just have a couple of beads like this, or you can make them even longer. That's completely up to you. So you just want to add however many beads you want, depending how long you want your dangle to be. So as you can see, that adds a bit more length to it there. And then just remember, when you sit it on the ring, because we're going to make a wrap loop up here, it's going to sit from the loops on the ring and come out like this. So that's going to kind of determine how much of a dangle you're going to get. So it's really up to you. I think for this one I want to keep it at the shorter length like this. And again, you can also easily alternate the lengths of your dangles if you put multiple dangles on there and kind of just build it up. So that's completely up to you. So I'm going to use this for now, just as the first one. I'm probably going to mix it up a bit as we go, and then we just need to make a wrap loop. And to do that, I'm going to get my chain nose pliers in, or flat nose pliers, and then grab, make sure all your beads are pushed right down to where they won't go any further down. And then place your pliers so you just have about a millimetre or two space in between your last bead and your pliers there, and then bend it back so you get an angle like this. And then we're going to get my veil making pliers again, and I'm just using these again to make sure that I get the consistent loops in all my dangles. Place them right above the bend or the angle, and then bend the end here back on itself around the pliers like this, so you get a circle on top of your beads there. And then what we need to do is, before we can finish off and wrap this, we need to remember to attach it to the ring. So that's what you want to do now. You've made the loop, and before we move on, you want to just add this to the loop on your ring. You can open it up a little bit to get space, like that, so it sits there. And then we need to close it off. So when you add something like this, because I've used up a lot of the space in the loop that I just made with the ring band there, normally you can kind of use your chain nose pliers and just grab hold of your wires while you then start wrapping. It can be a little bit tricky if you don't have much space, so using something like your round nose pliers can be helpful because they have a much finer tip to them, and it's just to kind of keep your wires in place there. So hold your loop, and then you want to start wrapping the end of your head pin there around, and then basically fill up the space that you have between your loop and the very top bead. Just fill it up until you have no more space, like that. Take your wire cutters, cut off the excess right down close, and then grab your chain nose pliers again, and then right where the end is, make sure to go in and just squeeze that down so it doesn't stick out and kind of can catch or scratch on anything. And just run your finger over it to make sure that it doesn't stick out. And then there you have your very first dangle attached. And you just want to keep doing this basically. And we have the two loops, so what I'm going to do is make different kinds of dangles, different amounts on, and maybe place them differently. I might start with the spacer bead next time, and then you want to fill up as much as you want on both loops. So I'm going to go across and add the dangles across both loops. So I've now finished adding all my dangles to my ring here, and I filled it up nicely, and I kind of reached a point now I can't really get any more head pins on there. So that's what it's completely up to you how you want to do that. If you want to just fill it up like this, and then you got it on your finger and then it moves nicely, or whether you just want to have a few on there, maybe just one, that's completely up to you. But there you have a nice kind of movable ring. So that's how you make this. Quite nice and quick and simple. It's just using whatever beads you want and then combining them however you want them to sit on your ring. So I really hope that you enjoyed this, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this basic Kumihimo bracelet but incorporating chain into the design. And this is what it looks like. So this is just a basic 8-strand Kumihimo braid, but I've replaced some of the cords with chain. This is quite a fine chain. So this is the effect that you can get. I think it's quite nice on its own. So you get a nice pattern on it, and then that chain just gives an extra twist to it than a regular braid. So you can obviously use it like